I had the opportunity to live in Colorado Springs from 1989 until 1994. And though I've only been back here for about 24 hours now, I'm reminded of how much I loved living here. And how much I loved being with you all. How much I loved the conversation we had around the dinner table last night, and singing this morning, and then going out to Peterson this afternoon, and then doing the action tomorrow. So it was just a terrific time for me here. You know, sometimes we live in a place for a fairly short period of time, 4 or 5 years, doesn't make maybe that big an impression, but Colorado Springs has just left a place in my heart. 5 years ago, on a spring day, I met a colleague and a friend as she was leaving the humanities building on the campus of St. Louis University. And she seemed upset, and so we talked outside the building for quite a while. She had just told JJ, who was the head of the theology department at St. Louis University, that she would not be able to teach the Spirituality of Nonviolence course in the fall or in successive semesters. Now, Celeste had designed that course and had taught it for the first time that spring, and she was really disappointed that she wouldn't be able to teach it. And she was also concerned because she was afraid that JJ wouldn't be able to find someone quickly enough to teach it. And new courses are pretty vulnerable. They've got to go, and they've got to go quickly, right? So my heart jumped a little bit because I thought it would be so good for me. I would learn so much teaching that course. And as our conversation came to a close, I asked Celeste if she would be okay if I offered to teach the course in the fall and in successive semesters. And honestly, she seemed relieved, and I think genuinely delighted, because I know how protective we teachers can be of our courses. We don't want just anybody to teach those courses, right? They have to go to somebody who's okay. Now, you can imagine JJ was thrilled. 20 minutes before, Celeste has told him she can't teach the course in this fall, and 20 minutes after, another of his part-time faculty comes in and says, I'll be happy to teach it in the fall. I learned so much teaching that course. Those of us who teach have the opportunity to do that. You know, it's one of the best opportunities to learn. One of the most wonderful ways to learn is to teach. And I learned from the discussions that our students had. I learned from the guest speakers. I learned from their weekly reflection papers. They would write a weekly reflection paper, and this way I got to hear what 20-somethings were thinking and feeling and wondering about nonviolence, and I'm thinking and feeling and wondering so many of the same things. I learned from our practices. We did a silent vigil for nonviolence in the middle of the campus every Thursday, which for most of the students was their first opportunity, their first experience of doing something like that, standing in silence, holding a sign indicating why they were standing in silence. And of course having to look at all their classmates as they walk by to change of classes, waving to them and texting them probably. Although I have to say, I don't think any of my students were texting as they were standing there that I saw. I've learned. Those of you who teach, you know this. Right? Right? If you look at me, right, if you're probably sitting in the back there, you don't see anything, I could be texting the entire time. But I learned so much from them. I learned from their challenges of me. St. Louis is a fairly small town. And if I was involved in peacekeeping training or nonviolent action or some other sort of demonstration or vigil or whatever it might be, more than likely, some of my students were there, and they're watching. The students love to watch their teachers. Do you really practice what you preach? Are you really walking the talk? And in fact, let me tell you just a very short, funny story about that. On the last day of class, I would usually bring my computer in, my laptop computer, and pass it around from student to student, because they're called to do an online evaluation of the course. Now, I would do a verbal evaluation with them, but the university required an online evaluation. Well, if you tell students, please make sure you do that, it's not going to get done. If I bring my laptop in and pass it around and they do it during class, then I'm going to look really good. They're all going to put their evaluations in, right? So what I didn't realize is that my neighbor Clarence, who's 14, lived below us with his grandmother, and came up all the time to play on my computer because it was better than his grandmother's. had put World of Warcraft on my computer. Right? And if you don't know what World of Warcraft is, it doesn't belong in a nonviolence course. Okay? So the last guy, the computer's getting passed around, and the last guy's a great big tall guy, Rick. And Rick brings it up and he said, Dr. Lears, you have World of Warcraft on your computer? And I said, oh, my neighbor kid put it on. Yeah, right. Sure, Dr. Lears. So I learned from their challenges of me, though. Did I really practice what I preached? Could I really walk the talk? We talked a lot in our class about nonviolence being a way of life, not something that you become on Thursday or at the end of the semester or by a certain time in your life. My favorite quotes from peace activists is that I'll be truly nonviolent about 15 minutes after I've died. We know it's a journey, right? It's a journey. And there were so many things and experiences and people that had prepared me to even think I could teach this class. Indeed, some of the people who had prepared me, or some of the experiences, some of the people are sitting right in this room, who prepared me to be able to teach that class. And I knew that class would prepare me for some next steps. Who knows what they would be? At the time, I thought perhaps it was to have a very different living experience in the decade of my 60s. Which is, what is it, 1:15? It's approaching very quickly. It's really quick. It's not tomorrow, but it's quick. But I thought that might be what it's preparing me for. A very different living experience in the decade of my 60s. Not sure whether that means on another shore or in this country. And it still may be preparing me for that. I still have a couple months to go here before I hit those decades of the 60s. However, another situation came up that I could never have anticipated, that I could never have imagined before I came upon the decade of my 60s. A very public and very painful and very intense situation that involved my own church. That, as I said, I could never have anticipated, but then was there right in front of me. And confronting me, and still confronting me, with all the questions that I would be discussing with my students as I went in on Tuesday and Thursday from 2 until 3:15. And I'd like to share a little bit about that experience and the questions that it raised for me, the challenges that it raised for me, the confrontation, as I said, in terms of my own commitment to nonviolence. And it raised them in a way that, as I said, an intensity that I could never have imagined. You know, sometimes you say, I'm getting through day by day. Well, I was working up to day by day during most of that time. It was minute by minute, and we know this, lots of us have been in these experiences where it's minute by minute, and then hour by hour, and then eventually you get to living up to the, okay, I'm dealing with it day by day. On December 28th, 2007, now, you know right away, somebody starts a story in that way, that's a seminal time. And we have these seminal times in our life, the before and after. On December 28, 2007, my really dear friend Mary Lou Gavin, who's a religious of the Sacred Heart, and pulled into the alley behind our house. She had just been at a funeral. I had been at the same funeral, and I had gone on to the cemetery and to the reception afterwards. And a young man approached Mary Lou in the alley. Now, in the alley in St. Louis, in the neighborhood in which we live, somebody approaching you is dicey. This could be a robbery. This could be drugs. This could involve guns and knives. And Mary Lou was, rightly so, a little nervous.